All right, welcome everybody again to Automating Success, how to save 10 plus hours a week with QuickBooks. We're going to talk about a lot of different things in this webinar today, some of which I've learned from using QuickBooks over the years, but we also have an incredibly awesome QuickBooks consulting and bookkeeping team of our own, and I kind of asked them for their opinions and like what do they do on a regular basis that saves them time when working for our clients. And so we've accumulated a number of different topics, some that might be obvious to you, some that hopefully will be not so obvious to you. Ultimately, we want to help you save time in QuickBooks, make using QuickBooks a better experience, and streamline your workflow. I don't know anybody who has extra time on their hands these days, so any time that we can get back is time well saved and time that we could be using on other things. So let's go ahead and get right into it. And the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to load up a poll, and I wanted to see what you think about this. So let me go ahead and launch this first poll, which is, where do you feel the most time is wasted in QuickBooks? Let me launch this on your screen. On your screen right now, you should be seeing a pop-up with this question. Where do you feel the most time is wasted in QuickBooks? And that could be in general or you specifically, your experience using the software. Where do you think most of your time is wasted? Give you about 10 seconds to answer that question, and then we'll go ahead and I'll show the results to everybody. All right, getting lots of different lots of different responses here. Give you another 10 seconds or so. Almost everybody's voted. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to show the results. All right, if everybody can see those results, I think it's very, very interesting. Obviously, a lot of you, which is, by the way, not totally unexpected here, feel like, and I'm trying to get my mouse to show this thing on the right side. Okay, a lot of you feel that data entry or manual data entry is a big time waster, and that is absolutely true. Correcting mistakes, very, very common. If you've done the data entry, you maybe didn't do it the right way, and so now you're having to go back and fix. Totally get that. And maybe just not being quite as aware as some of the features that can save you time, which, by the way, hopefully at the end of this webinar, you'll feel a lot more confident in that and be ready to go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll. We'll get back to the webinar, and I'm going to go ahead and get into the agenda for today. So we're going to cover 4 primary things today. We're going to be talking about some of the top automation features in QuickBooks. Again, you may be aware of some of these, maybe you're not aware of them. I'm going to take you through some of the most common ways that you can save time. And then we'll also go through just a little bit of a mini case study. I'm going to share some examples of how much time can be saved in some of these different areas. And then I'm going to actually go step by step and show you a few of those so that you can actually see how to set it up, where to go in the software to set up some of that automation. And then I'm going to end the webinar with more time-saving tips and tricks. I've saved some really, really cool stuff for that section 4, which again, I think are really, really nice. You may be aware of some, but hopefully not all, and we'll be able to level you up in terms of your speed in the software. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk through is some of the automation features in QBO, and specifically, I want to talk about bank feeds. A lot of the things that we do in QuickBooks revolve around the bank feed type of feature. That's your banking transactions, your credit card transactions, your deposits. You've got these transactions hopefully flowing in to your QuickBooks, or maybe you're manually entering those transactions now. And there's some really cool tools within the bank feed feature that can save you time. So I'm going to specifically talk about bank feeds, bank feed rules, as well as some what I'm calling bank feed helpers. Those are things that are intended to help you in that bank feed process. And again, hopefully will save you some time. So first thing is, within QuickBooks Online, the first thing, if you haven't already, is you should connect your bank account. if you've got a bank account, checking account, money market account, savings account, if you have a bank that's connected or connectable with QuickBooks, you should do that because that is going to help streamline those transactions getting into QuickBooks. Doesn't mean they're always going to be right. It doesn't mean they're always going to be categorized appropriately. And so we'll talk about that. But instead of having to manually put in every piece of data, connecting your bank and credit cards, by the way, can be a big time saver. Now, and just one caveat here, obviously, not every single financial institution in the world is compatible. There are some that aren't, there's some that are. Banks are getting more and more specific in terms of their bank access rules and restrictions, and some of them will require you to authenticate or re-authenticate on a regular basis. And that's just a bank security thing, so we should be happy about that. It's there to protect us. But once you have connected your bank accounts, being able to match transactions is a big time saver. In your bank feed, you'll see these transactions which will say, match, match, match. And you obviously want to look at those to make sure they are in fact a match. But in general, you're going to find that those matches are going to be pretty accurate, and that will save you time. The data is already there. You just click the match button, it automatically adds it to your register, and now you're moving on. Okay, so don't want to ignore the fact that that's right in front of you, but it's a very big time-saving feature. Okay. The second thing I want to talk about is what's called bank feed rules. Now, these rules can be a gotcha as well, so we have to be very careful about rules. But when we talk about rules, we're talking about transactions that fit a specific criteria over and over and over again. And when they do fit that criteria, they will be automatically categorized within your system. So, for example, maybe you've got maybe you're, as a business, you're renting equipment all the time, and when you do, it's always within a certain dollar range. It's always coming out of a specific account. You have a description that you always want to tag in there. You have a specific payee, or maybe even a customer that gets tagged associated with that. Those are the types of things that you can automate through bank feed rules. You can make all these selections. And now when I said that this is kind of a gotcha, notice on the screenshot, there's a section here that says automatically confirm transactions this rule applies to. My team specifically advises against using that auto add. Now that doesn't mean you shouldn't use rules, but what we want to do is we want to use rules to auto categorize these different types of transactions, but still have you be able to review those transactions before they get added. A lot of times when our bookkeeping team is maybe cleaning up transactions, what we've found is that maybe something got auto added when in reality it should have been tagged in a different way, okay, or categorized in a different way. So these rules are intended to save time, and when things fall within that criteria, like the amount is less than $500, it has a specific word in the memo or description, things like that, we can be pretty sure that this should be tagged a specific way. Okay, so bank feed rules can be a big time saver. Another one that I really like is this thing called categorization history. So what I'm suggesting to you is leverage that categorization history. So what does this really mean? Okay, what this means is if we've gone out and spent money, we've used our credit card at a Shell gas station, and every single time we've gone to that Shell gas station, we've categorized that as fuel expense, things like that. Well, let's say that you get a transaction that comes in and it's not automatically tagged, it's not automatically matched, and obviously, if I'm saying, hey, it's Shell, it's always fuel. What I'm really talking about here is, let's say that you have a history of categorizing a transaction a certain way, but here you are, it's weeks later, maybe even a month or two later, and you forget how that transaction should be categorized. You can pull up what is called the categorization history. So in other words, in the bank feed window, when you click on a specific transaction, you can see how that transaction or that type of transaction has been categorized in the past. And you can see, okay, it's always been tagged as rent. It's always been tagged as insurance. And that will help you then correctly tag or categorize that transaction this time. And so in the poll that we asked, the question was, what is one of the big time wasters? And fixing or correcting mistakes is a big time waster. And so if you're categorizing your transactions correctly in the beginning, that's time that you're not going to have to spend correcting those transactions going forward, okay? So that's categorization history. Very, very good thing to take a look at. All right, so let's move on to one other topic in general, and this is using the features within the software when we can to streamline our workflows. So big picture on this one is we're talking about things like built-in time tracking, built-in payroll, and I know a lot of clients, I know a lot of small businesses that use all sorts of different payroll systems and time tracking systems. And by the way, there's good reasons to use some other systems, and there's, but just to be aware of it, QuickBooks has a built-in time tracking feature if you've got the right tier within QuickBooks Online. It also has a built-in payroll system that you could subscribe to, and they're in the software. So you don't have to go outside of QuickBooks to do these things. You can be doing them within QuickBooks by itself. And so let's specifically, when I talk about time tracking, again, how are you tracking your time? Are you doing it in some other system that you have to then export and import into QuickBooks? Are you doing manual paper or spreadsheet-based time tracking where you have to go into QuickBooks and record that time? Maybe you're recording billable time that you want to then pass on that cost to that client. If you're using an external system or paper or spreadsheets, that is time that you could be spending more wisely if you use the built-in time tracking feature within QuickBooks. It used to be called T-Sheets. Now it's called QuickBooks Time, and it basically serves that purpose of being able to track your employees' time. But what's also really cool about it is instead of manually re-entering all that time, the time will flow automatically into QuickBooks because it's there, and you can then use the approve buttons to approve that time and then have that timesheet or that time data flow directly into payroll, which again is another time saver as well. So use the built-in time tracking feature. Let's also talk about the payroll side of this, because if you're tracking time, it probably means you're paying employees for time. Okay, so if they're hourly employees and you're trying to pay them for 36 hours or 38 hours or 42 hours or what have you, using the built-in payroll feature will save you a lot of time. And there's a couple of reasons, in my opinion, why it will, or why it could save you a lot of time, is because number one, even if you're using an ADP or you're using Gusto or you're using Paychex or some other payroll service, some of those have obviously connectivity where that transaction data is flowing in, but others have more of a manual process, maybe where you're running a payroll general ledger report, and then you're having to go into QuickBooks and manually create a journal entry where you're putting in the payroll expenses and putting in the payroll taxes and putting in the payroll liabilities. And again, if you're manually doing those payroll entries because you're using an outside payroll service, that again is time that you could be saving if you just used the built-in QuickBooks payroll feature. Now, one of the biggest reasons why I think this is important, why you should consider using the built-in payroll feature, is also for things like job costing. In other words, if you are paying your employees, but some of those payroll expenses need to be attached to jobs or projects, if you're using QuickBooks Time and you're putting in, hey, I spent this much time on this specific customer, then that data flows into payroll. Those job costs can be attached to those paychecks, so you're not having to or manually apply job costs based on your payroll sort of after the fact. Okay, so that is another big reason. So, if somebody was calling me and saying, should I use QuickBooks payroll? Should I use another payroll service? Yes, there's costs to weigh pros and cons on the actual payroll services, but your time is also incredibly important and valuable. And so if you're doing any of those types of things like job costing payroll, or having a lot of timesheet data that you're having to re-enter, this can save you a lot of time. All right, let's talk about another integrated feature that, again, I think is very underused. This is something that I highly recommend, and that's integrating payments. So in other words, using the built-in QuickBooks payments merchant account within the software. Again, I know a lot of clients of ours that use other systems. They use Stripe, they use PayPal, they use other different merchant type of accounts to process payments. And you may be thinking, well, you know, maybe I'm going to use those others because they might have a slightly lower discount rate. Okay. Well, and that may or may not be true, but I will say this: your time, and this is what this webinar is all about, is how do you save time? Your time is valuable, and if we can use the built-in payments feature within the software, and that will help not only those payments get attached to the invoices they're attached to, automatically flow into your deposit process, you know, subtract out the fees, all those things that can happen automatically, or what I like to say is automagically sometimes within QuickBooks, can save you a lot of time, and quite frankly, can make up a lot for maybe even some lower rate you might get somewhere else. One of the things I'll point out about this is that if you contact VARC Solutions, we are an Intuit QuickBooks solution provider, and we actually can get you better rates than if you just sign up for QuickBooks payments within the software itself. So we've all seen the pop-ups, right? You've been in the invoicing window and you've seen that little shiny object that says get paid faster, you know, sign up for payments. And if you do that, you'll be enabling the feature, and it'll be great. It'll save you time. But what I'm suggesting is actually, if you haven't turned that feature on yet, contact us at VARC Solutions, because we can probably, not just probably, we most likely will get you a better rate on that QuickBooks payment accounts. We actually can save you a little bit of money on the discounts. And then you need to do that before signing up for that payment account. If you're not sure how to do that, again, my contact information will be at the end of the webinar, and you'll be able to see that, okay? All right, so let's continue talking about a couple other of these automation features which are intended to save you time. The next one is recurring payments. So all of us have those charges that hit our credit cards, right? Like as a consumer, you know, my credit card's getting hit every single month for, you know, my phone bill. My credit card's getting hit every month for my insurance bill. And those are things that you can be charging your clients for as well in an automatic fashion. You can turn on what is called recurring payments, so that if you're accepting those credit card payments, you can say, hey, I want to charge this customer every week, every month, every quarter, whatever you and that client have agreed to, or that customer have agreed to, and you can turn on and get paid faster. And again, that's now saving you from having to enter that payment every month. It's saving you from having to record and save or match that payment every month, because those are the types of things that would be automatically matched within QuickBooks. By the way, it's really very easy to do as well. If you're on the invoices screen, if you're on an invoices screen, for example, on the right side, you can click that button, the little drop-down arrow, and then choose Make Recurring Payment. Or if you're on an actual invoice, there's usually a More button somewhere on that screen where you can then turn on or receive a payment, record a recurring payment, which is again going to save you a little bit of time. Okay. When you record recurring payments, there's a couple caveats here. So first off, you can tell it when to charge that client the first time. So in other words, you can say when to charge. You can select that future date. You can pick a specific start date when you want that recurring charge to happen. You can tell it when it should end. And that could be, you've got an annual agreement with your client. So you might want to say, I want that to end after 12 months, okay? You can also tell it how often you want that transaction to repeat. Is it monthly? Is it weekly? Is it semi-monthly? How many months? What day or date of the month do you want that to happen? And you can also turn on reminders initially, right, so that you can remind that customer to accept the recurring payment before the start date. Okay, so in other words, if you turn on the reminder and they accept that auto recurring payment before the start date, then that thing will happen automatically for you. Okay, all right. Let's talk about recurring transactions. So this sounds the same, but it's different. So the last topic was about recurring payments. This topic is about recurring transactions. So again, let's talk about the flip side of this. You know, maybe it might not be on the getting paid side. It might be on the expense side. I've got a check I write every single month. That could be for rent, or it could be for insurance. It could be for, you know, some sort of tax that you're having to pay. It could be any of these types of things, internet charges, software expenses. You know, every single month I get hit for a Microsoft charge, I get hit for a Slack, you know, chat expense. These things happen all the time, and if they're the same amount and you want them to happen automatically within the software, you can pull up that transaction, record the payment or record the charge, and then click that Make Recurring button to have that transaction automatically created for you on some particular schedule. So we've gone through a lot so far. I want to take a pause here and I want to do another poll, and I'm going to answer some of the questions that were posted in the question panel as well. But let me go ahead and I'm going to load up the second poll here. And the question is, which feature will save you the most time? So out of the features that we just talked through, which of those features do you believe would save you the most time? And by the way, Xenia, yes, we will share the slides with the attendee list after the webinar. So yes, we will definitely do that. Okay. All right. A couple more seconds here, and then we will show the results. I'm going to give you a little bit more time, still waiting for a few more people to answer the question. Which feature will save you the most time? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to share the results here. The results are in, and it looks like recurring or memorized transactions is going to save you the most time. That's fantastic. Yeah, and it will save you a lot of time. By the way, Lisa, your question behind the scenes was, is this webinar based on QuickBooks Online? Yes, all the content that I'm sharing on the screen is about QuickBooks Online. However, Lisa, I will say this, most, if not all, the features that we're talking about do also apply to QuickBooks Desktop. I'll make a mental note of that for the rest of the content and just highlight or pull out anything that would definitely not be in QuickBooks Desktop or vice versa. But the concepts are true. So just to restate a few things. So QuickBooks Time does integrate with QuickBooks Desktop. QuickBooks Payroll works the same way. There is a bank feed feature within the QuickBooks Desktop. It works a little bit differently. It's not quite as good as QuickBooks Online in terms of bank feeds and matching, but it is a feature that is there and it can save you time. And yeah, definitely within QuickBooks Desktop, you can also memorize recurring transactions, and you can also set up for that QuickBooks payments and be able to send an invoice out with the payment link on it, and they can pay you with a credit card. So hopefully that answers that question. But yeah, I'll try to point out both of those as we go. Okay, so real quickly back to the poll. So 56% recurring memorized transactions. Looks like bank feed rules, bank feed categorization history can also be a big time saver, and that's fantastic. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hide that poll, and let's go ahead and go on to the next section here. All right, so a little bit of a case study. So just from working with clients over and over and over again and seeing different client scenarios, we've been able to see pretty clearly how much time somebody can save. You may save more in one area, maybe less in another, because it just depends, quite frankly, on what features you're using or not using. But on average, I would say these transactions or these automation features that I've just talked about so far can save you at least 15 hours a week in time saved. And so I want to give you a real quick breakdown of what that might look like for you. Bank feed optimization. So when we talk about the bank feed itself, being able to match or auto-match transactions, using the bank feed rules, the categorization history, those types of features, if you've got, more than, 100 transactions a month where you've got bank account charges, bank checks, ACH drafts, you've got credit card charges, things like that, deposits as well. That auto matching and those bank rules can really, really save you a lot of time. Time tracking and payroll optimization. I've seen very, very easily this can save 6 hours or more a week when you're doing it via paper, when you're doing it via an Excel spreadsheet, having to not only track all that time and have all the other people putting into those manual or paper time cards, and then you having to then go re-enter all that data into your payroll. That is a lot of time wasted and can be optimized within QuickBooks. Payments integration. Quite frankly, I mean, this could save you 20 hours a week. It just depends on how many invoices you're doing every single week or month, and how you're accepting payments for those invoices. But those can be, again, a very big time saver. 3 hours a week is very conservative if you're using those built-in features. And then finally, use of recurring transactions. My estimate is easily an hour a week. If you've got your rent, you got your insurance, you got your software expenses, things like that, and you're just having those automatically recorded, those can save you at least an hour a week. And again, could be possibly even more if you've got a lot of recurring transactions that are the same amounts, they fall within those typical guidelines. Okay, let's continue going. And what I want to do is I want to show you a few of the step-by-steps here, okay? You may be able to figure some of this stuff out on your own just by going into the software and doing some searching or hunting or pecking. But I wanted to show you a few of the step-by-steps as well. And so specifically, when we talk about things like bank feed rules, you've got this transaction that's on your screen. How do you turn it from one transaction into something that's automatically categorized for you going forward? And that is through setting up a rule, okay? And so a couple different ways of doing this depending on what type of transaction that you're in. But on the screen here, just with the instructions, you basically pull up a transaction and then you can click Create Rule, name the rule, set the conditions, make any other changes, and then click Save. And so where does all that start? I'm going to pull up just the QuickBooks Online screen here just for a second, and that way you can see it right there. So if you were in the bank feed section and you clicked on a specific transaction and you've filled it out, you've categorized it, things like that, there's that little button right there that says Create a Rule. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Another is there's actually a Rules tab on the banking transaction. So if you go to Bank Transactions and then go to Rules, you could start by creating a transaction, or creating a rule. But I recommend pulling up a real transaction that you've already got, filling it out, and then creating the rule based on that. But it is possible to create a rule right there on the screen. Okay. All right. So that is just real quickly on the bank feed rules. Recurring transaction, same concept, but if you've got a transaction on the screen, whether it's an invoice, whether it's a credit card charge, what have you, on that screen, there will be a Make Recurring button down here on the bottom that you can click. And when you click on that, it's going to open up a window that helps you then fill out some of the things in terms of like the interval. Is it monthly? Is it on a specific day? When do you want to start? When do you want it to end? Things like that. And so look for that Make Recurring button. If you don't see it, it could be within the More panel. Sometimes you might see it within a gear icon. There's a lot of different places that QuickBooks places things, And so if you don't see it, look around for some of those other areas that might pull up a panel on the right side that you could then fill out the information, okay? Same thing on invoices, etc. So that's make recurring. And in terms of the instructions that I put on the slides, you pull up the transaction, such as an invoice, expense, or check, fill it all out as much as you can, right? Save the transaction first so that you've got it locked in, and then look for that make recurring button so that you can turn it into an auto entering transaction going forward. When you're recording such as a recurring check, you'll be able to give that recurring transaction a name, a template name otherwise known as. When is it going to happen? Is it automatically scheduled every X number of days? Is it a reminder to do it? Or is it something you just want to be able to create when you're ready to and make it an unscheduled recurring transaction? But you can fill in things like who the payee is, what account it's coming out, the interval, start date, end date, all those types of things, and then click Save Template. Now, one little note here, and I think it's important to call out, not everything can be turned into a recurring transaction. There are some transactions which you have to use the built-in QuickBooks features to create. And a good example of that would be bill payments, paychecks, sales tax payments. Bill payments, paychecks, and sales tax payments are transactions. They're kind of like special transactions in QuickBooks that have to be attached to something else. So, for example, a bill payment is paying a bill. A paycheck is something you create using that payroll schedule. So it's creating the paychecks based on a payroll schedule. Sales tax payments, you've got those sales tax liabilities accumulating through the month, and you have to use the sales tax feature in QuickBooks to pay it, as opposed to just like a normal check or things like that. And so there's some of those types of transactions which you have to use the built-in feature, and you can't memorize those things. All right, so what about setting up QuickBooks payments? Again, my encouragement to you is definitely leverage the QuickBooks payment feature within QuickBooks. I think it is a very, very big time-saving feature, and would encourage you to do that. We do want to save you a little bit of money, okay? And so if you haven't signed up or if you haven't enrolled in QuickBooks payments, reach out to VARC and let us make sure that we can get you the lowest possible rate on that QuickBooks merchant account. After we get your merchant account set up, you've qualified, you've got the lowest rates, then you can turn on that feature within the software, and we can help you do that as well. And that makes sure that you have the right account set up, it's attached to your QBO, and you've got it working in the software. Okay. And by the way, again, just as a step-by-step, if you had an invoice on your screen and you're like, where is that button that I can say I want to do this? Again, it could be in a couple different places depending on what version or tier of QuickBooks you have. But notice on the top of this invoice, I've got a Manage button, and right here under this on this little flyout sidebar, there's a section here for payment options. And if it's not set up, that's where you could also go in and set it up. So there's a couple different ways to get there, but this is just one way. You know, if you're thinking about getting paid for an invoice, you might be going to an invoice first, and then you can go in and manage and look at and get that stuff set up right there. Okay. All right. So that is some of the step-by-steps on how to get set up with those. I want to go through a couple more time-saving tips and tricks. I did get a question from Jay. Jay's question, I think, was on that payments. Is that for both online and QuickBooks versions as well? And the answer is yes. QuickBooks in QuickBooks Desktop, where you get to it is a little bit different. But under the it's either the customer menu or the company menu on QuickBooks Desktop, and that's where you'll be able to say, you know, merchant account center, sign up for QuickBooks payments. It's in there, and again, I can show you that after the webinar is over if you'd like. Thanks for the question, Jay. All right, so let's go into some money saving time saving. Did I say money saving? Time saving tips and tricks. So I'm going to go through some keyboard shortcuts, which I think you're going to like. We're also going to talk about this thing called the Right tool for QuickBooks Online. Talk about browser tabs, finding tips, and also this thing called the desktop app for QBO. So some really, really cool time saving keyboard shortcuts. Again, some of these are some of the ones that our team uses all the time. Think of these as kind of like our favorite keyboard shortcuts. And so the first is just this category called date shortcuts. And really, this is so super cool if you've never done this or seen this. But you see how in the date field shortcut, there's like the letter M and H and W and K. Well, think of how you spell the word month. It begins with the letter M, it ends with the letter H. The word week starts with the letter W and ends with the word K. And so if you we're in a date field and you wanted to change the date on that transaction to be the beginning of the month, you would push the letter M. And if you wanted to go to the end of the month, you'd press the letter H. And if you want to go to the end of the week, you do K, or the beginning of the week would be W. So you can see how those letters correspond to the words, as well as using T for today, Y for the beginning of the year, and R for the end of the year. I'm going to show you that on screen here in just a second, but I also like the plus and minus keys to go forward a day or backward a day. And I use these all day, all the time, and they are fantastic. So for example, let's say I was on an invoice screen and I wanted to change that to the beginning of the month. Well, I could hit the letter M and it's going to take me to the beginning of the month. And if I hit the M button again, it actually goes back another month on the screen. If I hit the letter T, it's going to go to today, Y to go to the beginning of the year, R to go to the end of the year. And again, let me go to today. I'm going to hit the T button. And let's say I just wanted to do this transaction for the 18th of the month. I could also do plus, 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 plus using my plus sign on my keyboard and go straight to that invoice date. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, couldn't I just pick up my mouse, click on the calendar, and then pick the date? Yes, you could. And oftentimes I will do that way. But if you're doing data entry, a lot of data entry, having to pick up your mouse and move it and click can be the slowest way, especially if there's a keyboard shortcut that you could use instead. By the way, those keyboard shortcuts for month, week, today, year, those also work in QuickBooks Desktop exactly the same. Okay, so those date shortcuts are really fantastic. Big, big time saver. Also, I put on the screen a couple of other shortcuts. If you press the Control key plus the Alt key plus the letter here that I've displayed on the screen for I for invoice, X for expense, C for customers, it'll open up that window within QuickBooks Online and take you straight to that window. All right, so those are some keyboard shortcuts. Let's also talk about this thing called the Right tool for QuickBooks Online. And quite frankly, a year ago, I did not know about this. This is something that my bookkeeping team uses to streamline their workflow. And they basically said, you have to talk about this on this webinar. So I was like, well, okay, let me learn about it and figure it out. So the Right tool for QuickBooks Online is actually a Chrome browser extension. It's not available in Edge, it's not available in Internet Explorer, it's not available in Firefox, it's only a Chrome browser extension. But if you go into Chrome and you go to search for browser extensions, okay, and you go to the place where you can like discover new browser extensions, you can do a search for Right tool for QuickBooks Online, add that to your Chrome, enable the extension, and then what you're going to see is very similar to what I have on the right side of my PowerPoint slide. This is a tool that will show up when you open up QuickBooks Online. So it'll literally be sitting on the right side of your window next to QuickBooks Online. And I encourage you to explore this. It's a pretty cool tool, but bottom line is it gives you quick access to frequently accessed areas of the software, whether that's the bank feed area, the bank register, maybe your balance sheet, maybe your P&L, maybe the chart of accounts, maybe your item list. But what's cool about this is you can actually customize this for your own. You can add your own shortcuts to Windows. You can add reports that you run all the time, and it is a big time saver. Now, obviously, this is going to work for your QuickBooks, okay? But one of the things that my team wanted me to make sure that you knew about was if you're, maybe you're a bookkeeper, maybe you're doing the books for multiple customers in QuickBooks Online. With that right tool, you don't have to, well, let me see if I can say this clearly. If you're in a particular client file and you've got that right tool, you can click that profit and loss button. It'll open up the profit and loss within that specific client or customer's QBO account. If you switch to a different client and click that button, it'll open up that company's profit and loss. So it's adaptable depending on what file you're in, so you don't have to keep closing and opening up necessarily the tool or telling it what client you're in or what client you're not in, things like that. So that right tool is a very, very nice time saver. Now, this is this next topic is about using multiple browser tabs for fast task switching. This is something that my team, quite frankly, they make fun of me about all the time, because if you look at my browser, I've got like 30 tabs open all the time, not just QuickBooks Online, but I mean, I've got my calendar and my email and all my other chat, everything else in a separate tab. But one of the things, the reason why I want to call this to your attention, and I'm going to bring it up on, again, the QBO screen here, I don't want you to ignore the fact that this is an incredibly powerful and easy to use thing. So for example, you see how at the top of my screen, I've got these different tabs for different things. Well, just imagine I open up QuickBooks Online and all I have is the dashboard here at the top, but I want to go open up, the invoices window. Well, if I click this link right here, it's going to change the current window to be the invoices window. But if I right click my mouse and I go to open that link in a new tab, now I've still got my current window, but now I've got this new window on this other tab here that pulls up the invoices window. And if I went to the expenses and I right click and open up a new tab, I can actually have multiple tabs open within the same QuickBooks company account or login, and I can very easily switch back and forth between those multiple windows. And that in and of itself can be a massive, massive time saver. Now, one caveat here again is if you are managing multiple client accounts, or maybe you've got multiple entities that you're switching out of and back into throughout the day, those tabs will not work to switch between different company files, okay? Because QuickBooks or Intuit is fairly smart when it comes to logins and single sign-ons and things like that. And so if you're in a specific client company file and you log out and log back into another company file, it's not going to maintain the different tabs with the different companies, okay? And so what you can do though is on your browser, you can switch to what is called incognito mode. And then within that incognito mode, you can log into QBO, have those different tabs open. And so in the incognito window, think of it like this big window here. This is one company instance. And then in another browser, I could have another window that has that other company's windows in it, okay? So normally that's not a problem, but it is a problem if you're doing multiple books for the multiple companies or multiple entities. So just keep in mind that you might need to switch to incognito mode if you wanted to be able to maintain separate logins at the same time and be able to do those multiple tabs. Okay. All right. And Xenia mentioned behind the scenes in the question panel, she says multiple windows are essential for reviewing tax returns. I love that in QBO. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Okay. Thank you, Xenia, for that. All right. So I'm going to go to another time-saving tip, which is how to find stuff quickly. And again, part of what I want to point out here is something that you may not have seen before, may not have observed or even thought to go looking for. And so I wanted to call it to your attention. Okay, first off, if you're in QBO, okay, There is a search feature at the top, which is very, very useful. I mean, you can search for almost anything here, and you can find recent transactions like invoices, sales receipts, payments, purchase orders. You can also just search, for things like rent, and it'll search and find different things. And that in and of itself is super fancy. I would assume, however, most of you have used that before. You've done the search feature. What I wanted to call out was, let's say you had an invoice that you had just filled out, okay, and you're actually on that invoice window. On the top left corner, you're going to see this little icon that you can see the history of. In other words, if you click that little time icon, it will show you recent invoice transactions here. And if you're looking for one that you just entered, this is a very, very fast way of finding it. You can even click View More, and it'll open up another window with all those transactions on the screen at the same time. Okay, so that little, I'm calling it the invoice history button that you can use. And that same thing is true on expenses, credit card charges, checks, things like that. And so you can pull up those expenses within QBO, and you can then click that little history icon, and it'll show you the recently entered transactions, again, to be able to scroll through and pick those things out really, really quickly. Okay. All right. So those are the recent activity button ways of finding something quickly. I'm going to conclude the webinar with one more thing, and then I'm going to ask for do one last poll, and then we'll wrap it up with any other questions that you guys might have. So we talk with a lot of clients that one, are using QuickBooks, but we also work with a lot of clients that are on desktop QuickBooks that eventually might be thinking about migrating or upgrading to QuickBooks Online. So when I think of saving time, and that's the message for this particular webinar, right, is how do we save time? Well, just imagine if you're switching from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, it is a very different experience. And it can take a lot of time to get up to speed on QuickBooks Online if you're used to how things work in QuickBooks Desktop. So getting up to speed quickly on QuickBooks Online can be a big, big time saver. I might just say muscle through it, right, and just spend enough time to figure it out. Obviously, our team spends a lot of time helping and training people on how to get up to speed. But there's also this thing called a desktop app for QuickBooks Online, and there's a version, if you're on a Mac, there's also a version of this for PC. I'm not going to step through all the steps here, but just you can see the steps on the screen there. Basically, you just go Google desktop app for QuickBooks Online. You're going to find a help article that talks about that desktop app. And if you're on Windows, you would scroll down that help article, and there's going to be a section that says for Windows. Download the app, install the app, and then it'll prompt you to log in using your QuickBooks Online Intuit ID, and then you can enable this thing called a desktop view. Now, you can still use QuickBooks Online exactly how I've been talking about it and showing it, but if you're in transition, that's when this can be very, very helpful, or quite frankly, you just like how QuickBooks Desktop works, but you still want to be using the QuickBooks Online version. And so what does it really do? Okay, well, it does a couple different things, but one of the most important things it does is it creates a menu at the top like you're used to within QuickBooks Desktop for your lists, your company, your customers, your vendors, employees, and banking and reports, so that you can more quickly get to those things that you're used to opening up. And then that desktop view sort of toggles back and forth between those two different modes. But you'll also see on the screen, it mimics the QuickBooks Desktop home screen, where you've got your vendor center, your customer center, and things like that. So that desktop app, again, you don't necessarily need to use this thing, but if you're in transition between desktop and online and you're feeling uncomfortable using QuickBooks Online, and maybe you feel like you're struggling to move around quickly, that desktop app may be something that you would want to take a look at. Okay, I'm going to end this webinar with a poll. I'm going to do my third poll here, and we'll launch this on the screen. And so based on what you've learned so far, based on some of those tips and tricks that we've talked about, how much time do you think you can save based on your own workflow, based on your own experience? Like, how much time do you think you could save? I'll give you 10 seconds of time saving to think about that, and then I'll show the results. All right, almost. So still got a little bit more. So wait a few more seconds. Let everybody get a chance to vote. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show. I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to show share the results. And so the majority of you feel like you can save at least 1 to 3 hours a week. And so, quite frankly, I'm very, very happy with that. If I can help you in 1 hour of a webinar save 1 to 3 hours a week, I feel like I've done my job. But I'm really impressed with some of you that also think you can save a lot more time. 12% of you think you can save 4 to 6 hours a week. And again, that's pretty awesome. 6%, 7 to 10 hours, or even 10 plus hours a week. That is fantastic. I hope that this has been worth your time, and I hope that you'll go take some of these techniques and apply them back in your own company. If you need help with any of that, certainly, of course, let us know. I'm going to wrap up with just a little bit about us, just in case you do need help further after this webinar. So again, my name is Brad White. I'm the CEO of VARC Solutions. We've been doing QuickBooks stuff for 25 years. We have a 17-person staff, and we focus on a lot of different things, but QuickBooks and QuickBase are kind of our bread and butter that we use all the time. We do bookkeeping, cleanups, migrations, and we also can save people money on QuickBooks and merchant accounts, as we talked about. We have clients nationwide, everywhere from Alaska that we heard at the beginning of the call, to California and Florida and everywhere in between. We work in different industries. Online, small to medium-sized companies. We work with clients using both desktop and our primary sweet spot is for clients that are scaling and growing, and then are starting to kind of run into some of those pains of growing. And then just a real quick, for those of you that have ever spoken with anybody on our team, just wanted to show you some screens, some pictures that you'll kind of be able to put a face with a name. But on our sales team, we have Adam. He's kind of like he's our sales leader. We have Casey Smith, which does our QuickBooks Services sales, as well as Emily Mendez, that is a customer advocate. She calls and checks in our clients every 90 days or so. And then we've got our great QuickBooks certified team that is here to support you. And again, so I hope this was helpful. If there's anything that we can do for you, let us know. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And then for those of you that are that want to stick around for a few more minutes, if you